The retirement celebration was everything Marla Patterson had imagined, at least on the outside. String lights shimmered overhead in soft golden hues, music floated gently through the warm Florida air, and laughter echoed through the botanical hall rented for the occasion. Her husband, Gregory, stood surrounded by old colleagues and former students, drinking in the praise like fine wine. People clapped him on the back, told stories of his wisdom and wit, and thanked him for his unshakable integrity. Marla, now 64, stood just a few feet away, smiling politely, her hand resting on a champagne flute she hadn't touched. She'd been proud of Gregory once, so deeply proud it ached. They met at a campus fundraiser decades ago. He had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. That night, he'd told her he was going to marry her one day. He wasn't wrong. They had spent nearly 4 decades together, raising 2 children, paying off a mortgage, surviving recessions, health scares, and the painful death of Marla's younger sister. Through it all, Marla had stood by him. She planned this very celebration as a final chapter, proof of a good life, well lived and shared. But something felt different now. Office. It started when he saw her, Lena Hartman. Marla spotted the exact moment. Gregory turned to accept a congratulatory hug, and when he lifted his eyes, he saw Lena standing near the entrance, wearing a dark emerald dress and a necklace Marla recognized from long ago. Time seemed to freeze. Gregory blinked hard, as if seeing a ghost. Lena smiled, no, smirked, and walked straight toward him. They hugged, too long, too familiar. Marla didn't move. She couldn't. That name, Lena, hadn't passed her lips in over 15 years, not since the falling out. Once, Lena had been her closest friend. They had met in a grief counseling group after Lena's divorce, and for years they were inseparable. But it ended in cold silence after a night Marla never quite unpacked. Something had happened then. She just never found out what. Now Lena was here, at Gregory's party, uninvited. "Marla," Gregory called over, clearing his throat awkwardly. "You remember Lena, don't you?" Marla walked up, composed. "Of course, it's been a long time." Lena's smile widened, unapologetic. "Too long. You look amazing. Retirement suits you both." There was something calculated in her tone. Too bright, too confident, like she knew something Marla didn't. Marla forced a smile. "We've been looking forward to it. One last big hurrah before we downsize and settle in for the quiet life." Lena tilted her head. "I thought you already bought the condo in Naples." Marla's face froze, ever so slightly. "We were considering it, but haven't made any decisions yet." Gregory cut in quickly. "She's just assuming. Everyone keeps pushing us to pick a spot." But Marla had heard it clearly. Lena knew something she shouldn't. The rest of the evening passed in polite waves. Guests came and went. Speeches were made. Their daughter Grace gave a heartfelt toast that made Marla tear up. But she noticed Gregory spent more and more time slipping off with Lena. Conversations by the bar, whispered comments near the doors. They stood too close. Their laughter too easy. And then came the final toast. Gregory clinked his glass. "To a life well lived," he began. "To my wife, who stood by me through everything. To our future, whatever that looks like." Marla looked at him. She suddenly wasn't sure what their future looked like at all. As the crowd raised their glasses, she looked across the room and caught Lena watching Gregory with a look that wasn't just nostalgia. It was something more, something dangerous. Later that night, as guests began to leave and the music died down, Gregory disappeared again. Marla found herself alone by the coat room. The air was cooler there, the mood quieter. Her heart thudded, not with jealousy, but with instinct. Gregory's jacket hung by the wall. She hesitated, then slipped her hand into the pocket. The phone was there. She unlocked it. A quick glance. Just enough. And then she froze. There, in the recent messages, was Lena's name. And the latest message. "After tonight, we're free. I booked the suite under M. Hartman, just in case." Marla didn't blink. She just placed the phone back exactly where she found it, closed the door behind her, and whispered to herself, "Not tonight, Gregory, not without a show." As the echo of clinking glasses faded into the walls of the botanical hall, Marla stepped outside for air. The Florida night was warm, fragrant with jasmine, and completely silent, except for the noise in her chest. That message. After tonight, we're free. What did it mean? How long had this been going on? She didn't need the answer to know one thing. This wasn't new. Her mind flashed back to 15 years ago, the last time she and Lena had spoken. They had been close, painfully close. Lena had leaned on Marla through the hardest parts of her divorce: late-night phone calls, emergency sleepovers, grocery store breakdowns. Marla had shown up for all of them. Gregory tolerated their friendship, but he never liked Lena. He called her needy, manipulative, said she drained Marla's energy. It caused friction sometimes, but Marla brushed it off, until the night it all ended. Lena had stopped by unannounced that evening. Gregory was out of town for a conference, and Marla had made pasta and poured 2 glasses of red wine. They'd laughed, watched old reruns, and Lena had started talking about her future again. New beginnings, a fresh move, maybe even a relationship. Then she got quiet. "I envy you, you know," Lena had said softly, twirling her wine glass. "You and Gregory. You make it look easy." Marla remembered smiling. "It hasn't been, but we grew into each other. Took work." Lena's eyes had darkened slightly. "You're lucky. Some people marry for love. Some marry for timing." The words had stuck. At the time, Marla thought it was bitterness, residual pain. But now, replaying that night through a sharper lens, the tone behind Lena's words felt less like envy and more like possession. And then she remembered the very last thing Lena said before walking out of her life. "You never really know someone until they stop needing you." Back then, Marla assumed Lena was referring to her ex-husband. Now she wasn't so sure. Back inside, the party had quieted. Some guests had left, others drifted to the open bar. Gregory was sitting on a bench near the fountain outside the hall. Lena stood beside him. Close, too close. She leaned in, whispered something, and he chuckled softly. Marla didn't approach. Instead, she drifted near enough to catch a small exchange between them. "I told you," Lena said a little too brightly. "We really pulled it off." Gregory shook his head. "We're not out of the woods yet." Marla didn't move. Her stomach clenched. "We?" She walked back toward the event tent without being seen and stopped at the small table where her daughter Grace sat with her husband and 2 children. Grace was laughing with her youngest, trying to get frosting off his chin. Marla bent down and kissed Grace's cheek. "Take the kids home early tonight. I'll handle everything here." Grace looked up, puzzled. "Are you okay?" Marla smiled. "I will be." In the private restroom inside the venue, Marla sat in a velvet chair, her mind spinning. She opened her phone and began cross-referencing hotel names in Naples. Suite under M. Hartman? She found it. A reservation made 4 days ago. 2 guests. 5 nights. She took screenshots. She saved copies to her cloud account. Then she pulled up Gregory's shared accounts, the ones she never checked because she trusted him. There it was again, a $2,000 transfer labeled consulting, to a name she didn't recognize. She searched the name, a company Lena had registered last year in Sarasota. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't some flirtation. It was a partnership, a whole second life built on secrets and stolen time. By the time Marla returned to the main room, she felt composed, still broken, yes, still nauseous with betrayal. But she had clarity now, and that was dangerous. She watched Gregory mingle with guests again, still smiling, still shaking hands like nothing had changed. Lena had vanished for the moment, likely powdering her nose or straightening her smug smirk in the mirror. Marla glanced at the small pile of speech notes on the table. She had written something light, sentimental, a reflection on their shared life. She tore the paper in half quietly and reached into her clutch. Out came a new set of cards. Blank, clean, full of new truths. As the event coordinator walked up to ask if she was still okay to speak next, Marla looked her dead in the eye and nodded. "Yes, and I'd like to go right after Gregory." The moment Gregory finished his speech, the applause was warm and generous. His voice had that practiced charm it always had. He thanked his colleagues, his students, his family, and with a brief glance at Marla, he said, "And to my wife, Marla, who's been my lighthouse, even when I drifted." Drifted. That word stuck with her like a shard of glass behind her ribs. Marla stepped up slowly, accepting the microphone with a serene smile. From a distance, she looked the part of the dignified wife, classy, graceful, soft-spoken. But behind her eyes was the quiet calculation of a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to expose. "I didn't prepare much," she began, scanning the crowd. "Gregory always told me I was better when I spoke from the heart." The guest smiled. She paused and glanced at him. "So that's what I'll do." She turned slightly, just enough to address everyone but not face her husband directly. Her voice was steady, far too steady. "Retirement is a strange thing. It makes you look backward and forward. It makes you reflect on what you've built and who helped you build it." She looked at Lena, now reappearing at the back of the room, adjusting her necklace and holding a glass of wine like she belonged. "I spent 4 decades thinking I knew the man beside me. But the truth is, sometimes when you reflect, you find cracks in the foundation. And sometimes," she said, her voice darkening slightly, "you find entire rooms you didn't even know were built. Without you." Murmurs fluttered through the crowd. Gregory's expression tensed, but he stayed seated, watching. Marla reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. "I found this message earlier tonight. It was sent to Gregory by someone in this room." She let the silence linger. "After tonight, we're free. I booked the suite under M. Hartman, just in case." Gas rippled through the space like a dropped glass shattering on the floor. Lena froze mid-sip. A few heads turned toward her instantly. Marla continued, unfolding another paper. "This isn't the first message. There are hundreds, hidden under fake contact names, cloaked in abbreviations and inside jokes. But you don't need a code breaker when you know someone's patterns." Gregory stood up slowly. "Marla, don't—" She raised a hand. "You had your speech. This one's mine." She pulled out her phone. "Here's another one. Tell her the Naples condo is just an idea. She's not ready for the truth." That was a week ago, right before he wired a few $1,000s to a business account registered under Lena Hartman. Now the room was not silent. It was electric. Guests shifted in their seats. Some whispered. Others stared at Gregory with wide eyes, their mental images of the devoted husband and professor crumbling by the second. Gregory took a step toward her. "Marla, please, we can talk about this." "Talk?" she echoed, her voice cool. "You mean the way you and Lena talked every Thursday while I was volunteering at the hospital?" Lena, red-faced now, stepped forward. "This is a private matter. You're humiliating yourself." Marla turned fully to her, eyes sharp. "No, Lena, I'm correcting the record. I was humiliated for years while you played best friend and lover behind closed doors." Lena opened her mouth, but the damage was already done. A guest in the second row stood up and whispered to his wife. Another woman quietly grabbed her purse and walked toward the exit. Gregory looked desperate now. "You don't have to do this here." Marla stared at him. "You should have thought of that before bringing your mistress to your retirement party." The event coordinator tried to intervene. "Maybe we should take a break." But Marla calmly held the mic tighter and spoke one last line. This celebration was for a lifetime of work, love, and honesty. And now that the lies are out of the way, I can finally retire too. From you. She handed the microphone back, not with fury, but with precision. Then she picked up her clutch, turned to her daughter, and said softly, "Let's go." Gregory reached out, but Marla walked past him like he was made of air. Behind her, the celebration didn't just quiet, it collapsed. The silence that followed Marla's walk-off was louder than any microphone. People didn't know whether to sit down or stand up, whether to finish their wine or just leave. The room had been warm with celebration. Now it felt like a courtroom after a guilty verdict. Gregory stood frozen in place, mouth slightly open, the flush in his face traveling all the way down his neck. He looked like a man suddenly removed from the pedestal he'd spent his life climbing onto. He didn't chase after Marla. He didn't even move, because deep down he knew she'd just given him a truth no apology could erase. Lena tried to slip out the back, but not before more than a few guests spotted her. One woman, a former colleague of Marla's, shook her head in disgust as Lena passed. "Shameful," she muttered loud enough for her table to hear. Outside in the parking lot, Marla stood beside her daughter Grace's car, still holding the folded printouts of the messages she'd read. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline of finally doing what she had put off for years, seeing the truth and naming it aloud. Grace unlocked the car, placing the kids in the back seat quietly, stealing glances at her mother. "Mom," she said carefully, "what do you want me to do?" Marla turned to her, voice clear and sure. "Take them home. I'm staying in a hotel tonight. I need a night to think. Alone." Grace didn't argue. She nodded and leaned in to hug her. "I'm proud of you." Marla squeezed her tightly, then let go. She didn't cry. Not tonight. She didn't sleep much in the hotel room. The lamp on the side table cast a warm glow over the bedspread, and her phone buzzed with texts she ignored. Gregory, Gregory again, and finally one from an unknown number that read simply, "You didn't have to ruin everything, Lena." Marla chuckled bitterly. "Ruin? No, Lena. You ruined it the moment you walked into my life behind my back." The next morning, Marla walked into her bank. She sat with a financial advisor and calmly began a series of actions Gregory never imagined she'd take. She froze their joint account, transferred her half of the retirement funds, flagged recent transfers to consulting firms, and presented documents for investigation. Next was the lawyer. She had seen his card sitting in her drawer for years, originally recommended by a friend who went through her own quiet divorce. Marla had kept it for someday. She hadn't known someday would be the morning after a retirement party. Sitting across the desk, she laid it all out. The texts, the hidden bank activity, the Naples suite under another woman's name. "You have everything you need," the lawyer said, impressed. "Most women don't come in this prepared." Marla's eyes were dry. Her voice was steel. "I wasn't prepared. I just refused to be blindsided twice." Gregory called again that night. This time Marla picked up. "Marla, please, just hear me out." "I heard you just fine," she said coldly. "You said enough in your messages to Lena. I messed up, okay? It wasn't supposed to go this far. She was just someone I talked to. I didn't plan for this to happen." Marla laughed, a humorless, hollow sound. "You talked to her. You booked hotel rooms for her. You sent her money from our retirement savings. That's not talking, Gregory. That's building a life." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Can we fix this?" "No," she replied simply, "but you can talk to my lawyer." And then she hung up. Over the next week, the story of the retirement party fallout made quiet waves through their social circle. Mutual friends reached out. Some were stunned. Others admitted reluctantly that they'd suspected something, but never imagined this. Lena, it turned out, had been visiting Florida often over the past 2 years. A few had spotted her near Gregory's university. He'd always claimed she was there for speaking engagements or conferences. Now they knew better. Marla didn't respond to most messages. She let the silence speak for her. But to the few who asked if she was okay, she wrote, "I'm not okay yet, but I'm free." Gregory didn't crumble immediately. He tried to recover, tried to reframe the story, as men like him often do. He called friends to clear up misunderstandings, told people it was a one-time mistake, that Marla had blown out of proportion, but it was too late. The truth didn't need defending. It had already sunk its roots into every conversation, every dinner table, every whispered phone call in their community. The real damage wasn't just in the betrayal, it was in how public it had become. Gregory's carefully cultivated image of the brilliant, devoted husband had shattered beneath Marla's calm voice and printed screenshots. Even the university, where he had only just retired, began to distance itself quietly. A board member who had been at the party told the dean that it was uncomfortable, unprofessional, and frankly shameful. The final scheduled tribute dinner? Canceled without explanation. Lena, meanwhile, vanished. Her phone went to voicemail. Her social media accounts disappeared. A neighbor of hers in Sarasota told someone that movers had come the morning after the party and cleared the house in under 2 hours. Just like that, she was gone. Marla didn't chase any of it. She didn't respond to Gregory's emails. She didn't reply to the carefully worded apology letter he had someone drop off at her hotel. Instead, she sat with her lawyer and began untying the knots of their shared life. "What you've got here," the lawyer said, skimming through financial statements, "is a textbook example of financial deception. He's been quietly preparing for a split. This new Naples condo, he listed it in Lena's name, but it was funded from accounts tied to your joint retirement trust. That's not just immoral, that's illegal." Marla nodded, her lips pressed tightly. She wasn't surprised anymore, just exhausted. "Can we stop him from transferring anything else?" The lawyer nodded. "Already filed the injunction. Nothing's moving without a court order now." She leaned back in her chair. For the first time in weeks, she exhaled. Back at home, the house felt hollow. Her clothes still hung beside Gregory's in the closet. His razor sat by the sink. The robe he wore every morning was still draped over the armchair in the bedroom. She didn't touch any of it. Instead, she walked into the guest room and began clearing space. She moved her things in slowly, intentionally. Every drawer she filled was a small reclaiming of space. Every picture frame she replaced was a quiet declaration. "I'm still here. You are not." Gregory came by once. She allowed him 10 minutes. He stood in the doorway, dressed in the same navy blazer he'd worn to the party, now wrinkled and dull. He looked like a man who had no idea where to go next. "I made mistakes," he began. Marla said nothing. "I got lost. You and we drifted. And Lena, she was just someone who reminded me I was still wanted." She stared at him for a long time. "Do you want sympathy?" she finally asked. "Because what I gave you for 40 years wasn't just love. It was loyalty. I showed up when it was hard, when it was boring, when it was silent, and you gave my loyalty away for attention." Gregory's eyes filled with something between guilt and shame. "It's not like it meant nothing to me." "It meant everything," she said. "That's the difference." He lowered his head. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to leave," she replied, "and not come back." He hesitated, looked around the room as if to say goodbye, and then walked out. Marla closed the door behind him, locked it, and turned away without flinching. That night, she sat at the kitchen table alone, a cup of chamomile tea in front of her and a blank notebook open beside it. She began to write, not about him, but about her, who she was, who she used to be, who she would be now. She didn't want revenge. She wanted release. But the irony was, by choosing her own peace, she had given Gregory the one thing he feared the most: a life without her, a reputation dismantled, a secret exposed, and a woman who no longer needed to forgive him because she'd moved beyond him. 2 weeks later, a heavy manila envelope arrived at Gregory's temporary condo in Clearwater. Inside, stapled neatly and without a single handwritten word, were the official divorce filings, complete with a motion to divide marital assets, freeze disputed accounts, and a subpoena for financial documentation dating back 5 years. It was Marla's silence that unnerved him most. No threats, no begging, no, "we need to talk." Just swift, brutal precision. Marla had always been the one who held things together: vacations, budgets, birthdays, even his tenure paperwork. He used to joke that without her, the house would fall apart. But now she wasn't falling. She was erasing him piece by piece. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Dana Blake, didn't waste time. "We've frozen the retirement accounts, filed the emergency motion on the Naples property, and we're in contact with the DA's office regarding financial misrepresentation. You could go after spousal fraud if you want. It's all there." Marla leaned back, arms crossed, unmoved. "How long will it take?" Dana smiled. "Less time than Gregory thinks." The forensic accountant found everything. Gregory had been siphoning money from their joint portfolio into a shadow company Lena created under the name Harwood Consulting. Transfers had started small, $800 here, $2,000 there. But over the past 3 years, it totaled over $120,000. And that Naples condo? It wasn't just an idea. Gregory had bought it, put the deed in Lena's name, and begun the paperwork to transfer ownership of a car, too. He was planning a new life, without telling the woman who built his old one. Marla reviewed the documents with eerie calm. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. She had stopped grieving. Now she was building a paper trail out of the ashes. Meanwhile, Gregory's world continued to shrink. The condo Lena had furnished for their fresh start remained locked. No answer from her, no apology, nothing. The number she once texted him from now went straight to an unassigned voicemail box. And the realtor told him she'd already signed to sell it. Lena had left him too, not for love, not for freedom, for convenience. He had been a transition, a bridge she used to climb out of her own darkness, only to discard him on the other side. Gregory, once so proud, now sat alone in a soulless rental with blinds that wouldn't close properly and a fridge full of silence. He called Marla once more. It rang, and then went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. Marla, meanwhile, had started a quiet project of her own. It began with a support group. One evening, she sat in a circle of 6 women, each in their 60s, each with stories of betrayal, loneliness, rediscovery. The room was rented at a local church, the lights warm and low, no cameras, no social media, just truth. When it was Marla's turn to speak, she simply said, "My name is Marla Patterson. I was married for 40 years. I was faithful. I was kind. I was lied to. But I'm still here, and I'm learning that surviving is not the same as living." One woman across from her nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. Another whispered, "Thank you." By the end of the meeting, 4 women stayed to ask her for coffee. By the end of the month, the group doubled. A few weeks later, Gregory's lawyer reached out with a settlement proposal. It was predictable, 50-50 split, a request to maintain his portion of the retirement account, and a polite note about avoiding public scandal. Marla wrote one sentence back through her attorney. "There already was a scandal. You just didn't notice it until people were watching." On the day she finally signed the divorce decree, Marla wore a soft gray pantsuit and a silver pendant that had belonged to her mother. She sat across from Dana in a quiet room and flipped through every page with purpose. "This is the last one," Dana said, pointing to the final line. Marla took a deep breath and signed. No tears, no drama, just dignity. She walked out of the courthouse alone, stepped into the sunshine, and smiled for the first time in weeks, not because everything was over, but because everything was finally hers. 3 months passed. Spring arrived in soft waves, breezes through open windows, blooming azaleas in the front yard, and the gentle hum of a life no longer haunted by deception. Marla had moved out of the house she once shared with Gregory. She didn't fight for it. She didn't need the bricks and beams of a home where trust had died. Instead, she chose a 2-bedroom cottage tucked just outside town. Quiet, modest. She filled it with books, art from local women, and frames of her grandchildren's handprints. Her mornings were simple now. Coffee at the kitchen counter, crossword puzzles, volunteer shifts at the library. But there was something radiant about the stillness. She didn't flinch at the sound of the front door. She didn't check her phone expecting betrayal. She had found peace. One Saturday afternoon, while organizing a donation drive with a local women's network, a stranger approached her. Late 40s, tall, sharp eyes. "You're Marla, right?" Marla blinked, cautious. "Yes? I'm sorry. I read about you. My cousin was at that retirement party. Said you stood up and said what no one else would have had the courage to." Marla offered a polite smile. "That wasn't courage. That was clarity." The woman laughed. "Well, it changed how I saw things in my own life." They exchanged numbers. Later that week, she joined Marla's growing support group. Word spread. Marla didn't want attention. She didn't need recognition. But quietly, gently, she was becoming a symbol. Not of divorce, but of dignified confrontation, of rediscovery, of what it meant to finally stop shrinking for someone else's comfort. On her 65th birthday, Grace hosted a small garden brunch. No banners, no grand speeches, just people who showed up because they loved her, and only her. Marla sat at the head of the table in a linen dress, her gray hair swept up, soft lines on her face like brushstrokes on a well-lived canvas. Her grandkids brought her homemade cards, Grace handed her a wrapped book of poems. Friends toasted to the most graceful exit we've ever witnessed. When it was her turn to speak, Marla rose slowly and held her glass. I spent 40 years thinking I had everything. Then I lost it all in a single night. But what I thought was an ending turned out to be a reintroduction, not to the world, to myself. There was quiet, then clapping, then tears. Later that evening, after everyone had left, she sat alone on the patio as the sun set. She pulled a letter from her pocket, postmarked from a P.O. box in Georgia. The handwriting was unmistakable. Gregory. She opened it slowly. Marla, I think about that night every day. You were right, about all of it. I've lost everything. Lena left. The condo's sold. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just hope you're happy, or at least becoming so. I miss the sound of your voice when you were proud of me. I miss the way you used to hold things together, especially me. But mostly I miss the version of myself I only ever was when I was still worthy of your respect. I hope you never feel that small again. I hope you're thriving. Gregory. Marla folded the letter gently and walked it inside. She didn't tear it up. She didn't frame it. She placed it in a drawer beneath old bills and forgotten keepsakes. Not because it meant something, but because it no longer controlled anything. A year later, almost to the day, Marla stood in front of a room again. This time it wasn't a retirement celebration. It was a workshop titled Starting Over at Any Age, sponsored by a local women's resilience collective. 50 women filled the community hall, some in tears, some with pens, some with their pain still raw, and all of them listening to her. Marla began not with a quote or a dramatic story, but with a single truth. I used to think the worst thing that could happen was being left behind, but the worst thing was staying in something that left me behind long before I noticed. She told them about her fear, her fury, the betrayal, the silence, the strength. But mostly she talked about the moment she chose herself over the version of her life someone else wrote. Afterward, a young woman approached her, barely 30. My mom's going through something similar, she said. I wish she had someone like you. Marla smiled. She does now. Outside, she walked slowly to her car. The sky was golden again, like it had been that night in the botanical hall. But this time, there was no weight in her chest, no secrets, no performances, just the road ahead, and the quiet joy of knowing she had not only walked away from the lie, she had rebuilt her truth, one decision at a time.